Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Filipi, the director of the Film and Video Department at the Wexner Center. And we are going to be joining with many theaters across the country in making the Béla Tarr film, a new restoration of the Béla Tarr film, Sátántangó, available for streaming. And we'll be offering it through our website through May 7th. And the company that oversaw the restoration and is distributing it now is called Arbelos Films. And joining me this afternoon are David Marriott and A. Toshinari, who we've worked with numerous times over the years in bringing a number of different films to the Wexner Center. So welcome, David, and welcome, A. And
Hi.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Sure. Sátántangó is such a well-known film in art house circles. I've seen it referred to as, the Great White Whale, or, the Ulysses of cinema, or, in a number of different articles. It's this mammoth 7.5 hour long black and white film that it's one of those films that a lot of people have heard of, but they've never had a chance to see it before. We actually showed it in 35 millimeter at the Wexner Center back in 2006. And so it's exciting that now it's going to be available. I know you'll be putting it out on home video eventually, but people are able to stream it through different theatrical or through different theaters' websites for the time being. Could you talk a little bit about why this film and how you got the rights to such a well-known film?
Yeah, maybe I can speak to the why, and then A was really instrumental in sort of the rights end. So if A wants to field that, but so our specialty is sort of trying to find films that either are older films that we restore through our sort of sister post-production company. We like to produce these things and either collaborate with international partners or work entirely on our own to produce these new 4K restorations for the lion's share of what we do. And so when we're thinking about films that we're going to want to release, we try to think about, like what makes sense for us specifically as a company with the resources that we have and sort of the curatorial disposition that we have. And, it's probably not a secret that doing these 4K restorations, it's oftentimes many years in the making to figure out where the rights are, to figure out where the materials are, sometimes to just do the restoration itself. So internally, we kind of have a long list of dream films, and we just kind of keep adding to it and keep chipping away at it. And, from the very inception of Arbelos, like Sátántangó was like unquestionably one of those films. It's one of my favorite films. I think it's, not to speak for A, but I think it's probably I know it's one of A's favorite films. One of Dennis Bartok's films as well. The three of us are sort of the curatorial team for Arbelos. And, unlike a lot of the other films that we sort of tried to champion in the past, Sátántangó is already quite well known. It's already sort of in that art house canon, but as you said, it's just incredibly difficult to see in any kind of like high quality version. So in thinking about, why to go after it, number one, we all love it. And number two, because we have these resources in-house where we can do digital restoration without having to kind of farm that out, it makes a lot more sense, kind of just financially speaking, to try to do a 4K restoration for a 7.5 hour long film, which, for anybody else would just be, it just becomes very difficult to have that make any sense. I mean, the world is full of huge Sátántangó fans, but we really felt that like maybe we're the company who can do this in a way that makes sense. And on top of all that, we just had a real vision for what we wanted the release to be. So it sort of really just checked all the boxes for us in terms of the why.
Right.
Yeah, and for how we got the rights, it's a little bit well, it was kind of a personal thing where I just wanted to buy the Sátántangó DVD from the previous distributor who had rights to it, and it was. I mean, I had it, I ordered it, but then it was back ordered, and then I was contacting their, helpline, and they just told me straight up that their rights had expired. So, and then we, got in contact with Béla, and it just went from there.
And, Béla Tarr is kind of notoriously skeptical of digital. can you talk about some of the conversations that you had I think these days people have to accept that this is probably how a project like this has to happen, and just some of the conversations that you had with him about, taking this very filmy film and doing a digital restoration, and this is how people are most likely going to see it moving forward as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because when we got in touch with him, number one, it was like a weird miracle to be like, wow, he's on email. This is, getting an email from Béla Tarr was like a very exciting day for all of us. And we all fully assumed that we would have to kind of like launch this big, campaign to be like, this is why it's worth doing in 4K, and here's all the advances and all the sort of stuff that you're talking about. And there really wasn't much of a convincing process. I firmly believe that, the reckoning that he had with digital and thinking through what that meant for his body of work had happened before we reached out. So in a way, the timing was kind of felicitous, because it did take a while to find the road in, the right email. And yeah, he was, maybe gung-ho is an overstatement, but he was very open to the digital process, like right out of the gate, which was a surprise, because as you say, he's very, very on the record as being sort of a digital skeptic. I don't think that he feels necessarily that the 4K replaces, like a director approved print. But I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, and that because he mentioned this when we premiered the film in Berlin during the Q&A, that it's 99% of the way there. So we'll take that as a win.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Has maybe more from like the business side, I know these are kind of, the type of things that if you're in this field, you're the least concerned about, but just given the length of the film, did it change your approach to, other than obviously the actual restoration of it, it's going to be different just because it's longer, but your thoughts for distributing it and exhibition and whatnot, did it change that at all?
I think the nice thing about just our model and the kind of, like exhibitors and venues that we work with, we're lucky that it didn't, in that sense. Like we knew people would get behind it because just it's a masterpiece, and it's worth getting behind, and it made it more difficult to schedule, of course, and the runs were adjusted, to adapt for such a long thing. But, we had a lot of faith going into exhibiting the film that we were going to do the same amount of theaters that we would on like a 2-hour film, just because it is Sátántangó, and there's going to be that faith and that interest in getting behind it. And we were proven right, and it was really heartening. The real thing is the restoration more than anything else. It was just, and like taking like the financial dimension out of it for a second, just purely the logistics of it, like trying to do something that's that long. And we can talk about it whenever you want, but like the process of actually restoring it was done here in LA and in Hungary. And so just the logistics of that were really where the length became the thing. Everywhere else, it's like, we certainly don't treat it as if the film is not 7.5 hours long. But
right.
I think there's something about both its reputation, its relative scarcity for the last decade, and the idea that it's, like the length is so much a part of it. It's like, it's an event to go see that in a day in a theater. And a lot of audiences really got behind that idea. And that was, really exciting and heartening.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I always have to remind myself, so the last time I saw it was 14 years ago, it was 35 millimeter. And you kind of forget, that there's a whole nother generation that's coming up that hears about a film like this, but maybe they, have never had a chance to see it before. And I think maybe a 35 print was circulating around not too long ago. But the Wexner Center didn't play it on that tour. But I'm wondering just your thoughts on introducing it to a younger generation. It's a film that really flies in the face of audience expectations in so many different ways, in the formal qualities, the style of the film, coming back to the length again. Just your thoughts about, introducing it to younger film goers, younger cinephiles who have heard about the film or read about the film, but have never had a chance to see it.
Yeah. A, do you want to speak to that?
Sorry, what did you? Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you see on all these like forums, younger people talking about how this mystical film called Sátántangó, and they've never been able to see it. And I think this kind of finally gives them the opportunity to see it in this 4K restoration as well. And I think we've kind of hit a point where, everything is so quick and everybody wants to, digest something quickly, but it's come to a new point where people are able to now go to another level of taking in something, a durational thing. And I think there's a new audience that's appreciative of that. So,
it's one of the things. Oh no, please.
Go ahead.
It was just one of the things, like, we're watching, like things like Letterboxd and Twitter, and just sort of seeing what people's feedback is to the film as it's been kind of rolling out theatrically and now through these virtual screenings. And I can't speak for A, but I was personally expecting it to be like 70% people that had already seen the film revisiting it, and like 30%, and it was completely the inverse of that, which is, this really exciting thing in like the Quibi world that we're now, kind of like everything kind of like ADD bite-sized stuff. And it's really nice that there is this whole other generation coming up that are just very excited and open to something that is this durational,
Yeah. I mean, durational is such a appropriate word, and it's an experience. There are a small handful of films that almost become more of an experience than, narrative driven, and this is certainly one of them. And you just hope that people, even if they're going to be watching it in their house, shut the lights off, close the curtains, hopefully they have a reasonably sized television so they can, get some of the impact of what a rich film that it is. So I mentioned, and you kind of have alluded to it, you're a unique company in that you don't have a huge catalog, and you're able to, I'm assuming, pick films that you're deeply invested in. I just wanted to rattle off some of the films that we've shown of yours over the years. Private Property, the great film with Warren Oates. Dennis Hopper's The Last Movie. Funeral Parade of Roses, Queen of Diamonds, the great Nina Menkes film, the Juniper Tree with Bjork, the Hungarian film Son of the White Mare, the animated film that we just showed in February. Any plans for that coming out soon?
Yeah, we're trying to kind of recalibrate that release because it was slated to open March 27th, which of course was right at the beginning of everything started changing. So we're looking at how it'll happen later this year. Definitely. It's just a question of like how and when.
Okay, because that's a stunner. So usually, and you can talk about this a little bit, there's a connection between film restoration and then the films that you put out. But you have put out some new films. We showed that, not The Dark Knight, but Dark Knight a number of years ago. And then you put out a couple of new films by Josephine Decker that we played. And how do you, what does it take for a more contemporary film to catch your interest? Well, let's start with that. What does it take for a contemporary film to attract your interest?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing. So we've been, of the films that you mentioned, we now distribute all of them. But the inception of A&I and Craig Rogers, who runs our post-production division, and Dennis, all working together predates to an earlier company called Cinelicious Picks from about now 7 years ago. So we were all at that company for 4 years. And then we sort of pivoted and collectively co-founded Arbelos, which is having its 3rd-year anniversary in May, so next month. And so really there's been a ton of contemporary films that we've been really in that 3-year gap of starting the new company that we've been really interested in. And it's really much more about just kind of the company narrative, which is like a very unsexy way to say that, but like we had transitioned the company, we were still representing a lot of the film, but it was different people running it, and it was a different name, and it was a different vision ultimately. And so we made the conscious decision to sort of stay in the new 4K restoration re-release world for a couple of years, just to kind of establish that, and then to move back into more of a split slate of like half 4K restorations, half contemporary films, which is what we've been doing at the previous company. Where, yeah, Tim Sutton's Dark Knight, John McGarry's The Mend, Ragnar Bragas's Metalhead, Josephine Decker's That Was Mild and Butter on the Latch. And so that's something we're moving back into. I mean, originally it was going to be at the tail end of this year, but everything for obvious reasons is getting a little pushed. So that'll probably be more like a 2021 Arbelos slate. Will look a lot more mixed between sort of the new and the old. But, you know, and A can follow up on this, but I think it's our vision for doing all of it is really just to find stuff that we all love is like the number one thing. It sounds a little like kind of hokey to say that, but that is, you know, as I mentioned, there's three of us who are really all kind of deciding, and we all have to be equally invested in something to do it. And we all have slightly different dispositions. And so I think that's interesting. It's the thing that kind of ends up with all three of us can kind of really get 100% behind and as importantly, have a vision for what the release will be. But yeah, on the contemporary side, we really love like emerging talent, you know, like first, second, third feature filmmakers, and generally people that are doing something that is either kind of formally or narratively kind of like path breaking, you know. And I think the same thing applies to the 4K restorations as well, whether it's sort of the durational piece or it's, you know, something like Funeral Parade of Roses that is just, you know, kind of like an explosion of ideas and talent. And they're all things that are kind of pushing at the edges of something. And that appeals to us, I think.
Yeah, and I think I forgot to mention Belladonna of Sadness. I think we didn't end up showing that one, but another just terrific film. And you do have a knack for finding these, you know, really one of a kind types of films that, you know, maybe they have a certain level of notoriety but, you know, not all of your films, but many of them, like Satantango is obviously an exception to this, but I think films that, you know, when people hear about them, or if they've never heard about them and finally have a chance to see them, they're, you know, completely, you know, how have I never seen this before? Or why didn't I know about this film before? And I'm thinking of Private Property, a film like I can't remember how much I knew about it before you guys picked it up, but I'm sure I knew very little. Could you just talk a little bit about how a film like that gets on your radar, and then kind of from that point to the point of releasing it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. That's really kind. That's what we're going for. And it's really nice to hear that. Well, Private Property, that one specifically I can speak to because that was one where I'm just am and always have been a huge Warren Oates fan. And before working with Cinelicious Picks, I was going to school for film archival studies, what was then called the Moving Image Archive Studies, MA at UCLA, which was sort of a program in partnership with the UCLA Film and Television Archive. And so I was interning there. And so the rediscovery of Private Property, like all credit due to UCLA Film and Television Archive, because they had found that and were in the process of doing a photochemical preservation
That's right. Yeah.
at the tail end of my internship there. And I saw it in a QC review and it just melted my brain. I was really ecstatic about it. So when we were starting Cinelicious Picks a year later, that was like at the top of my list of, we should really, you know, partner with UCLA. We can do a digital restoration because they've already done the photochemical preservation. It'll be this great thing. And yeah, that was a really awesome.
Everyone should hunt that film down.
Yeah, that's one of the ones, I mean, we love all our children equally, but I personally just, that's one of the ones that I'm the proudest of being even a little bit involved in you know, the rediscovery of, because it was for years a lost film until UCLA found that negative. So, but yeah, that's specifically film. Yeah, and it's on the bubble of like, it's a film noir, but it's real late in that period, and it's kind of exists in this weird liminal space. It's all shot in Leslie Stevens, the director's house, starring his ex, or his wife at the time, which gives it this whole other kind of surreal Baroque quality. I love that film very much. Do
you have a favorite in the family, A?
Favorite in the family? I don't know. That's tough to say. There's other filmmakers that might be watching.
Yeah, I guess you better.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a guest.
Well, I guess, you know, Satantango holds a special place in my heart. You know, even to be able to meet Béla and to work with him is kind of, you know, really surreal. But also Nina Menka's, you know, Queen and Diamonds. I love that film. So, and the whole wave of kind of newfound appreciation for films right now. And
Yep.
going all over the world, giving her talk. It's been kind of amazing to see all that.
Yeah, that was an important release that you guys did, and I mean, played a big part of what you're talking about. Maybe finally, if you could speak a little bit to the challenges, the reason we're doing this interview, the reason that we're showing Sátántangó, via streaming, obviously the kind of great worldwide shutdown that we're all experiencing. Could you speak a little bit to the challenges of the different components of your company, acquisition of new titles, how it's impacting maybe anything that you're working on right now, and then how it's impacting your distribution strategies for things that you might be working on?
Sure. Hey, do you want me to answer that, or do you want to start?
Yeah, you can go ahead. You can start.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you talked a little bit about just like the volume of what we do is not necessarily, we're not mass releasing, or we're not releasing, like 100 titles a year. We're trying to do something that's like very specific, and like we'll do 5 to 6 a year and really try to get behind all of them in this real way, and kind of craft releases and all that. And that's kind of what makes it fun for us to do it. And we don't really want to change that. But the thing is, like that whole thing, the thing that makes that possible is the relationship and the collaboration we have with art house theaters. And so that's why it's been really heartening. Like, we were not, the innovators of these virtual cinema screenings by any means, but it's been really nice just to be able to get Sátántangó out there and participate in that way. But like, looking at what we have for the rest of the year, it's sort of like Son of the White Mary you just mentioned. We're now having these questions of like, do we delay that until like the fall, or do we then do that as some sort of like a virtual screening thing? Is there a way to kind of make that a broader collaboration? Like, how do we have a moment around the film is really what we're ultimately trying to do every time. And so we're trying to kind of just rethink what that would look like in this new space. But it's, I mean, it's unavoidable that it's incredibly challenging and really difficult. And we're not built to be necessarily like a streaming company. Like the theatrical is hugely important in what we do. The home entertainment is hugely important in what we do as well. That's something that we can't really do in the same way right now. And so we're trying to think through what that will mean as we produce the Sátántangó Blu-ray for November. There's, it's very difficult to do half the things that go into a home entertainment release like that in terms of what the supplemental materials are. So there is no kind of obvious answer for that yet. And then in terms of the rest of the slate, we've acquired a bunch of films that we're restoring either ourselves or in collaboration with other archives. But right now it's, we can't scan film. We can't do color grading in the same way. Like, normally there's 5 to 10 of us in a room doing a color grade, usually with a filmmaker who's come in or some iteration of that. And now we need to think about how that'll look if it's going to be, 10 different people looking at it in 10 different places. How do we all look at the same thing? How do we do notes? How do we do that whole process? The one thing that is relatively unchanged is actually the digital cleanup, which our post supervisor Craig Rogers handles. And that's, that's him in a room going frame by frame, and that we can still do, but you have to scan the film first. So it's, it's I wouldn't say like necessarily fundamentally disruptive, but it's like all the things that so many things that are the core of what we do are now very different. And so we're trying to think about, how that looks now. Right.
Kind of like everyone else, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish I had like more innovative answers. It's like, we're like everybody, we're just taking it day by day and trying to figure out what to do. It's been, it has been really exciting to see these virtual cinema screenings really taking off. And I mean, I can't speak for other distributors, and we're all kind of very new to this, but like, we've been really happy with what we're seeing in terms of audience for it.
Great.
And that's, that's exciting.
I mean, not much more to add, but yeah, I mean, it's just supplementals for Sátántangó Blu-ray have been quite a challenge, just because and I know a lot of people are waiting on the Blu-ray as well, so we are trying really hard, but these things aren't open, and things can't really move forward because of that. And even trying to set up interviews, no one can leave their house. We can't even hire a film crew. So there's the challenges. And yeah, like David said, it starts from scanning the film. So that can't happen right now either.
Right.
So yeah.
And for the most part, you've had positive feedback for the availability of Sátántangó and theaters being able to present it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really nice. It's like just in terms of audiences coming out and supporting like distributors and venues and places that are important to them. It's like you hope that will happen when something like this goes down, but to see it actually, to see that really happen in real time is a rare bit of kind of bright light in an otherwise sort of very dark stretch in history. So that's
It's really an interesting film to present this way. We've been doing some of this, streaming a number of films so far, and this is really going to be interesting because it is one of those films that there are so many people who haven't had a chance to see it. It's such a famous film, so it'll be interesting to see how our audience responds to it. And
yeah, no, we're excited for it. It's also like to pull back the curtain a little bit, not to be too big brother about it, but we can tell who watches the entire film, like not by name, but just like the amount of people that go all the way through, and like everybody's been watching it all the way through, which is,
in one sitting.
I don't know, not necessarily in one sitting, but people are watching the entire film, which is like the drop off rate is very low, which is again, like, go art house cinema crowds,
I was talking with a friend about it, and I mentioned, that it's a long film, and they were like The Irishman, and I was like, well, times 2. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that was nice when we had it at the New York Film Festival last September. It was nice to be like, I think it might have been the Times or something that had mentioned it's sort of like the film that's longer than The Irishman. So that's all right.
That's a good pull quote.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for talking with us, and we're really excited that we're able to stream Sátántangó along with so many other theaters across the country. It's obviously we really admire the work that you guys do and value our partnership over the years, and we look forward to seeing what comes out next.
Thanks for asking us to do it, and thank you for supporting us over the years. It means a lot.